Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling some groundbreaking ideas from Sir Ken Robinson that honestly completely shattered how I view human potential. We're going to look at the rapid transformation of our world and ask a really tough question about how we're actually preparing the next generation. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to actively question literally everything you've accepted as normal about our modern education and work systems. What if the very institutions we built to make us smarter are actually training the genius right out of us?
Section 1. An Unpredictable Revolution.
We are caught in a literal revolution right now. Think about it. Kids starting school today will be retiring around 2070. We have absolutely no idea what the world will look like in 5 years, let alone then. This wild unpredictability is driven by an imminent technological shift. We are rapidly approaching a point where silicon chips are going to have the processing power of an adult human brain. Eventually, they'll be capable of learning and rewriting their own operating systems based on sheer experience. So in a world where machines can process information just as smartly as we do, human imagination, our organic creativity, becomes our absolute most vital, unique asset. Section 2. The Human Resources Crisis. And this brilliantly illustrates our current predicament. It's really a tale of two parallel crises. We're all hyper-aware of the natural resources crisis, right? The long-term environmental effects of industrialization and how we extract from the earth. But we completely ignore the second crisis, the systematic plundering and wasting of human talent. We are literally wasting the best talents of our children simply because our institutions are locked into an old industrial model. To show you just how broken our system's radar is for spotting human potential, check out these amazing examples. Paul McCartney's music teacher didn't think he had any musical talent, and by the way, George Harrison was in that exact same class. Elvis Presley was kept out of his school glee club because they said he'd ruin their sound. No way, right? And John Cleese, the legendary comedian, went all the way from kindergarten to Cambridge without a single teacher thinking he had a sense of humor. Our standard institutions routinely, completely fail to spot generational genius. Section 3. The Industrial Education Factory. So, how did we get here? Why is our talent radar so incredibly broken? Well, our current system is built entirely on the industrial mindset. It was quite literally modeled on the principles and processes of industrialism. The whole shebang is focused on standard production, a rigid, linear timeline of progress, and ultimate conformity. Our schools were essentially built to mimic factory floors, not to cultivate dynamic, individual human minds. Let's look at exactly how schools mimic these factories. First off, there's a heavy reliance on conformity through standardized testing. Second, you've got this rigid hierarchy of subjects. Math and science are placed at the very top, while the arts are pushed way down to the bottom, all based on these old ideas of industrial utility. And third, we group highly diverse kids together strictly by their age. We literally batch them as if the most important thing they have in common is their date of manufacture. It's honestly an absurd way to treat organic human development.
Section 4. The Truth About Creativity.
If we're going to survive this unpredictable revolution, we absolutely must redefine creativity. It isn't just about painting a picture or performing a dance. It is the operational process of having original ideas that actually have value. And this applies to everything. For instance, in pure mathematics, getting the highest level of a PhD isn't just judged on being right. It's judged on its originality and its aesthetic beauty. Creativity is a fundamental human capacity that applies across all disciplines. Okay, I want to drop a massive data point on you here. There was this longitudinal study on divergent thinking, which is basically the ability to see lots of possible solutions to a single problem, like finding 200 distinct uses for a paperclip. Do you know what percentage of kindergartners scored at a genius level on this? 98%. Yeah, 98% of kids aged 3 to 5 are literally divergent thinking geniuses. Now, what's really interesting about this data is what happens next. When they tested those exact same children 5 years later, the genius levels absolutely plummeted. And by the time they tested them as adults, a mere 2% scored at the genius level. So what happened to them? Well, they became educated. They spent years in a standardized system looking for one right answer at the back of the book, which systematically trains the natural genius right out of us. Section 5. Diagnosing the real problem. Let's explore the societal symptoms of forcing dynamic young minds into an outdated industrial box. Think back to the 1950s and 60s. There was a massive epidemic of tonsillectomies. Doctors surgically removed millions of tonsils simply out of routine habit. Today, we don't have a tonsillectomy epidemic. We have an ADHD epidemic. But instead of an actual biological plague, what we're often doing is medicalizing boredom. We are medicating children who are simply bored out of their minds by slow, analog curriculums. To put the sheer scale of this into perspective, current estimates show around 8 million kids have been diagnosed with ADHD in America. This has driven a massive $3 billion drug bonanza for pharmaceutical companies handing out heavy medications. And a lot of times, schools and parents are administering these drugs simply to keep kids artificially focused on a totally outdated program. This highlights a really profound tragedy in how we treat learners. Think about it. An aesthetic experience is when your senses are fully awake and you are vibrating with the excitement of the present moment. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses down to avoid discomfort. Instead of providing engaging, aesthetic, educational experiences for these digital natives, we are quite literally anesthetizing them with medication, just to force compliance with an old industrial routine. Section 6. Farming Human Potential. So what is the remedy? Well, it's a profoundly hopeful one. We have to fundamentally change our core metaphor for human growth. We have to completely abandon the machine model. Humans are not standardized machines that just require passive compliance. We must embrace the organism model. Human beings are dynamic. We thrive on motivation and feelings, and we require very specific, nurturing conditions to grow. Great leaders, great parents, and great educators, they can't act like industrialists anymore. They must act like farmers. You can't force a plant to grow, but you can absolutely cultivate the perfect conditions for it to flourish.
A beautiful, real-world example of this is the Death Valley bloom. So Death Valley is famously barren, right? But in 2004, a really rare 7 inches of rain fell. And by the spring of 2005, the entire valley floor was carpeted in a spectacular explosion of flowers. The vital lesson here is that the potential in Death Valley wasn't actually dead. It was merely dormant, sitting just beneath the surface, waiting for the exact right conditions. Human potential is exactly the same. It is never truly dead. It's merely waiting for the right environment to awaken it.
So the crucial point is perfectly captured by Michelangelo. He famously said, "The problem for human beings is not that we aim too high and fail, it's that we aim too low and succeed." We have built a standardized system that aims low and reliably succeeds in producing conformity. It is time to stop aiming for standardized mediocrity and start aiming for individual greatness. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. What conditions will you change today to allow the dormant talent around you to finally bloom? Whether it's in your home, your workplace, or your own personal development. How will you stop acting like a factory manager and start acting like a farmer of human potential? Think about that and start cultivating. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.